that I am loved before anything else.
Today I'm here with Jordan Lally to have a conversation about hope. Jordan is a mental health advocate. He's a singer-songwriter with the band The Big Infinite. He's a meditation and mindfulness teacher, as well as a father. And he also experiences anxiety and depression in his own life. So, Jordan, I can kind of relate to some of those anxiety feelings right now. I'm really excited for this interview. I'm excited to meet you and talk with you. I've loved seeing the things you've done before, hearing your music, and done some meditations with you virtually. Do you mind if we just start out with a meditation so that we can both calm our nerves for the rest of this interview?
Absolutely, yeah. So there's a lot of different approaches to meditation, but I always kind of start from the same place. And really, if I'm diving into any meditation, even if it's with students that have been with me for a while, I usually kind of remind them of some misconceptions. So I'm going to just do the same right now. Number one, we don't have to sit in a fancy meditation posture. If that's accessible to us, beautiful. But if we need to lie down flat on our back, that's okay too. Lean against the wall, whatever. That's sort of like the number one misconception. And number two, the primary one really though, is this idea that you're supposed to stop your thoughts. That's like, I'm supposed to silence my mind just like that. And leads people to really have a lot of experiences of frustration with meditation or even to believe that they can't meditate. So that's not the case at all. We're not trying to stop our thoughts or forcefully silence our mind. We're just learning to observe our thoughts. And so to do that, we use an anchor in the present moment. We guide our awareness to, and it sort of serves as a frame of reference to become aware of our mind, doing what it wants to do at times. A lot of different anchors, but we'll just use the breath for right now. So we're focused on the breath, and we'll use a specific breathing technique I refer to as the easy breath. So we inhale through the nose, and then we exhale slow and steady through pursed lips, like you're exhaling through a straw or whistling without making a sound. So by pursing the lips, what we're doing is helping to regulate the flow of breath on the exhale, slow it down. So when we do have any kind of anxiety or nervousness or stress, it helps to assuage our nervous system and shift us into a parasympathetic state, a relaxation state. So it's a really helpful breathing technique in meditation, but also just in everyday life. So we use that easy breath into the nose, slow and steady out through the mouth as a centerpiece for our meditation. And we'll just go a few minutes. Any questions before we get going?
No, I'm excited.
Okay, cool. Well, I invite you, if you're comfortable, to close your eyes. Certainly, we can keep the eyes open, but generally much easier to access a meditative headspace with the eyes closed. And we'll start our meditation together with 3 deep breaths. We're going to be inhaling through the nose and then just audibly sighing it out, letting go. So let's inhale through the nose and then sigh it out. Again, inhale and sigh it out. And lastly, inhale and let go. So we'll start in straight away with that easy breath technique. So inhaling through the nose and exhaling slow and steady through those pursed lips, gently extending the exhaling breath. In through the nose, slow, steady exhale through the mouth. Practicing the easy breath at your own pace, your own rhythm, whatever serves you in this moment. Just remaining aware and mindful to extend the exhale, to slow down the breath. And so the easy breath is your anchor, it's your home base. You focus on that sensation, the sensation of the inhale through the nose, the sensation of the slow, steady exhale through the mouth. So our intention is to anchor to the easy breath, but naturally our mind will wander. And that's okay, because we're not trying to stop it from doing so. We're just noticing when it does, noticing when we're lost in thought, and then making a conscious choice to come back to our breath. In through the nose, slow, steady exhale through the mouth. It doesn't matter how often the mind wanders. It doesn't matter what it wanders off to. It doesn't matter how long we're lost in thought. As soon as we become aware, just make that choice to come back to our breath, and through the breath to come back to the experience of the present moment.
I choose to dance when my body is failing me, 'cause I am more than just the
One breath at a time, accepting ourselves just as we are. So we accept that headspace if it's really active, thoughts are racing. No need to fight those thoughts. We allow them to move through while remaining tethered to this easy breath in through the nose. Slow, steady exhale.
I must remind myself I am loved.
One breath at a time, we're accepting ourselves on a physical level as well. So if there's any aches or pains that can be addressed by adjusting our posture, then we feel free to do so. It's not a stillness competition. But otherwise, just accept how the body feels. If there's areas of discomfort or pain that we cannot address, we cannot change, we just breathe through those experiences. Not trying to make them go away, but rather being present with them, honoring them, honoring the body as it is.
I won't let go of me. I won't let go.
As we breathe,
I won't let go.
we're also accepting ourselves emotionally,
No, I won't let go.
allowing ourselves to feel just how we feel in this moment, if that's anxious or at ease, happy, melancholy, however we find ourselves, we honor. We make space for those emotions to express themselves, one breath at a time. In through the nose, slow, steady exhale.
This is just a game. I know it in my bones, but the thoughts remain. It's all love, and this is just
In this space of meditation, there's nothing to change, manage, or control. Simply practicing acceptance, one breath at a time.
nowhere to be. Again in tears, again I pray, and again I plead. Last time around, I offered my dreams, anything to find me some peace. It's all love, and this is
And we'll bring this meditation to a close, just as we began with our 3 deep breaths. Together, let's inhale through the nose, and sigh out. Inhale, sigh it out. And lastly, inhale and let go. As you're ready, taking your time, opening the eyes. So,
Wow. Thank you.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every time that I do that, I'm amazed. It's just incredible what your body's capable of when you slow things down like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's super, super powerful practice. Why exactly is the practice of mindfulness and meditation so beneficial for our mental health?
Well, for a lot of reasons, I think really for me, it comes down to a sense of empowerment. My experiences of depression and anxiety, I largely felt like a victim of those experiences. I couldn't control my thoughts. I couldn't control my depressive overwhelm, the physical feel of anxiety. But the more I practiced mindfulness, the more I started to change that dynamic. And really, it came down to one simple realization: I am not my thoughts. When I really wholly believed the hype in my head 24/7, it was like a roller coaster, up and down. This positive thought, great, I feel good. Then this depressive thought, now I'm down the dumps, up and down. But perhaps as you experienced in that meditation or other ones, you start to notice your mind wandering rather than just sort of following it around like a dog on a leash. You start to see it. And there comes with that a sense of empowerment that I have a choice. Like, this thought in this moment might serve me beautiful, but this other one might not. And so that gives me a sense of freedom and sort of choice. And we flip that dynamic rather than being the dog on the leash. We start to use our brain in a really positive way that serves us. And so that's why I think really it ultimately leads to a sense of empowerment, letting go of that for me, what felt like victimhood, that I didn't have any control, that that just my mind controlled me. It changes that, so those changes are mirrored in the brain and throughout the nervous system. So it's just an amazing practice. And I would say it comes down to really a sense of empowerment.
I love that word, empowerment, because it allows us to no longer be slaves to our thoughts and our patterns,
Yeah, absolutely.
And in my life, I'm oftentimes busy on the outside, which means on the inside, in my head, I'm busy too, thinking through some anxious thoughts some of the time. But maybe it's because I'm preparing for this interview. I've started to be a little more mindful this week. And I started to realize that here in Southern Idaho, the birds are starting to sing. Maybe 6 months out of the year, I forget that birds even exist. They're out of my head.
Yeah.
But being present, just practicing a little bit of mindfulness can allow you to see a lot more of the beauty that's around you. It helped me to appreciate it more.
So beautifully said. I think that for me, it's been a difference. It's been a shift from this like narrow subjective perspective, almost like living life on a tightrope of just my timeline of my past and then my predictions into the future. Yeah. And then mindfulness allows me to find the present moment. And then just as you said, there's all this beauty around you. There's birds, there's people. Even the most mundane things can be profound if you give them like some mindful attention. And there's a sense of empowerment, of security in the present moment. There's just this spaciousness and not this tightrope of just the past and the future. Because usually what we're predicting anxiously or otherwise into the future is just a result of what we've experienced in the past. But when you find the present moment, it's just full of possibility.
Right. Yeah. It gives you the opportunity to actually adjust that trajectory.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's a powerful feeling. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. That got me prepared and more grounded, anchored, like you said, for this interview.
Nice.
So you've experienced quite a lot of things in your past, and you have a bright future of your life. But tell us just a little bit about how you transitioned from kind of the band life on tour and playing shows that you were living a few years ago to now being really deeply involved and invested in mental health and in mindfulness and meditation.
Yeah, the turning point for me was my father's passing. It was a long battle of depression that culminated in suicide. And that was the great wake-up call of my life. I was just lost, and I didn't even realize that I was. It was sort of unconscious with it all. And his struggle was really an education for me. It was enlightening, because I wasn't even aware that I was depressed or anxious. I didn't even have that language. It wasn't in my ethos. People weren't talking about it. And my whole experience with my dad, and certainly his generation, my generation, was stigma. So you didn't talk about those things. And even with his struggle with depression, my wife and I would cover his meetings for him for his company, the printing company. And we would sort of, tell different tales and stories to friends and family, all to hide that he was severely depressed. And it shifted my focus and understanding. It shifted my understanding from really thinking about depression and anxiety as something that was a weakness to instead something that was an illness or a disease or something that I could, again, have a sense of empowerment over. I didn't need to hide it in shame. And it really wasn't, I was learning that really, particularly through the last year of my father's life, because he was really mired in depression. And I spent a lot of time with him, go to his doctor's meetings with him and have a lot of conversations. And it was just so apparent that his brain was sick. And he just wasn't there, right? His light just wasn't shining through. It was obstructed by his unhealthy brain. And witnessing that, and that culminating in suicide, just really crystallized for me, and like this just understanding for myself. And I started to see myself in him. I had a similar tendency. He's worried about banks and the printing industry. I'm worried about the music business. And it was just really, really an enlightening experience, and one that I've kind of continued to steep myself in after his passing with the practice of meditation. But yeah, that's really was the shift from like this wholly kind of solely focused on the band and touring and got to make it. What's the next thing? And nothing's ever enough. We did this tour, this show, more, to like, whoa, like slow down, find something that's like more heart-centered instead of just coming from my headspace. That's really been the shift and the turning point for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to apologize that you had to experience that, because that's a really difficult thing that I can't imagine. At the same time, I'm really grateful and I really admire what you've turned it into. This huge challenge that, like you said, is something you can't control. It's something that's not your fault, almost like your thoughts wandering in a meditation. But you do have the opportunity to influence what direction it goes in the future. When you slow down and assess and say, hey, this is what's going on. What can I do to turn it into something that's for me instead of, happening to me? So
you used that word trajectory earlier, and that's really what it was. It was like I saw that my brain was going on a similar trajectory to my father's. And so while he was my best friend in the world and I love him with all my heart, it was a blessing in many ways. Like I wouldn't be on this current trajectory, this current path, without that wake up call, because I was set in my ways. I was stuck, dude. I was not coming off that path, like not a chance.
Right. Yeah. The way that I have heard you describe it before in my research is it almost sounds like an addiction, is the next thing, the next show, the next release of a song. And you really had a huge trajectory change with the passing of your dad. One of the things that I've heard you mention is that your journey with mental health really started to shift when you started to share the way you were feeling. So I'm curious, that's a really difficult thing to do, especially if you've lived decades of your life without feeling comfortable sharing that, or maybe even feeling comfortable accepting that you are experiencing those things. So what are some steps that somebody who might be in a similar position could take? And who was one of the first people that you shared your mental health journey with?
Well, so for me, initially it was like I gave my dad's eulogy, and that was the first time I was honest. We talked about his suicide, how our family handled that. After that, people came up to me in the church, and they just started talking to me, and they started sharing with me their stuff. And then those conversations were the first time that I shared about my own personal experiences. Mm-hmm. The first person, though, was definitely my wife. She's always been my confidant, and I sort of measured my vulnerability through her. Like I would say, I'm thinking about sharing this on this YouTube or this interview or this piece of content or whatever, and she just just lovingly supportive all the time. And then for me, really the whole journey, with the exception of that like initial like big truth, standing there giving the eulogy, everything has been baby steps. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I would offer to anyone else. It's like, it's all a practice of getting comfortable being uncomfortable, kind of getting comfortable feeling vulnerable. And we don't need to re-traumatize ourselves and go to some just big swing at truth, right? You just have a measure of compassion for yourself as you do that, but no, have an intention of where you want to head, to be more honest with yourself and with those in your life. Yeah, that's really how I've arrived, and where I continue on my journey is just baby steps, expanding your comfort zone. And then all of a sudden you look back, a couple of years down and you're like, wow, I can't believe I'm this honest, or I'm doing this thing, or you know what I mean? It's crazy if you just kind of have an intention and you just one step at a time in that direction. You don't look at the top of the mountain. You just one step at a time,
Yeah, that's the only way. In one piece of content where you were very vulnerable, sharing about the story of your 25th birthday party and how that turned into more of a search party to find your dad who was missing, who had sadly been through a depressive episode at that time and needed some help. But along with that story, you also shared an invitation as part of your family's foundation, the Ed Lally Foundation, to share my truth with the hashtag my truth. And I thought that was a beautiful baby step, like you say, just to share, you know what, today my house is messy. Today I woke up late. Today, and those things are things we all experience. And when we share them, let other people know, that can be empowering. That can be a feeling of connectivity. So I'm curious, you mentioned that your dad's your best friend, and I can tell you still have a strong connection with him today and relate to him on a lot of levels. Tell us a little bit about that.
It sounds odd to say, but I feel closer to my dad now than I did when he was alive. When he was alive, there was all these walls of thought and habits and patterns and just between us. It was just, we were buddies and we hung out all the time, but I don't know. There's just this immense spiritual connection that I feel now to him because all that stuff's out of the way, and so that's all. I just sense that both him and my mom, who's thankfully still alive, they've just always supported me, and with each step into vulnerability, I felt my mom here with me, and my dad, spiritually just kind of urging me forward and helping provide a safe place, a landing spot. Because to expand your comfort zone and to step into vulnerability, it is an uncomfortable process, and there are people who ultimately it's brought me closer to a myriad of different people. It's brought me new experiences, new people. Those people that were in my life, I have this beautiful, connection now that's a lot deeper than it was before. But there's other people that aren't ready for that. And that's another thing I would offer to folks. Like, as you inch your way towards, a more authentic, kind of honest expression of yourself, some people aren't going to be ready for it. And there's been experiences of that, where there's people that were part of my life 8 years ago that, are kind of more on the periphery. It's all love, but we just are on we're just in different places in our life. And so that's part of the journey too. So through all those uncomfortable experiences, my parents, my wife, my daughters, they're just there to kind of, it's a, home, like a landing spot, as I said.
Yeah, that's very important. I love what you shared. You also told a story about your band, The Big Infinite, which, by the way, you guys, if you enjoyed that meditation at the beginning, just wait until you hear some of The Big Infinite's music, because it is that meditation and mindfulness practice just merged and blended so beautifully with music. I was listening to you this morning, man, as I was cooking up my omelet for breakfast. And I love music, and I love that practice of mindfulness, starting to get an anchor for my day. That's super duper powerful. Would you mind sharing this story again? Because it's one of my favorites, because it just demonstrates so well the importance of having good influences and good support system around you. How did your bandmates respond when they found out the day that your dad had passed away?
We were on tour in Florida, and it was a really eerie place to get this news. It was like we were staying at a friend's house in between shows, and it was a swamp. So it was like all sides, sun was setting, swampland. It was very, very odd, eerie place as it was. And I got the call from my wife. And as you can imagine, it was just disbelief, devastation. And they were right there. And I just, like, the last thing I remember is falling into their arms. And they literally physically falling into their arms and then ushering me into the back of our tour van, driving me through the night back to Maryland. Nobody said a word, really. They were just, the moment didn't call for any words. It just called for them to be there, for me and kind of literally carry me. And they did. And it was just this beautiful moment. And they have stayed with me on this journey, together, all of us on this journey ever since. Like, we went from, I joke about this often, we went from playing festivals in California or like these really cool venues or bar gigs till 2 and 3 a.m. to like waking up at 6 a.m. and playing a public high school. You know what I mean? Like that's not where, that's not where we thought we were going. That's not the trajectory we thought we were going on. But yeah, it's just been amazing. And like all the authenticity of those relationships that I was referring to, our dynamic has changed between the three of us. That's actually gives voice to what we were just talking about. We were a 4-piece at the time. And once we started really doing the mental health focused stuff, one of our bandmates, it just wasn't for him. It just wasn't in that, in that space. And so we're still buddies, it's all amicable, it's all good. But DJ and Andre, the three of us are like, we're just family. Like we've been through it all, and we've all shared our own struggles, and we've just, we've just gone from being sort of coworkers to being family,
Yeah. And part of the journey, I think, is learning to respect that each person has their own path, their own personal trajectory. And dude, I just love that parallel of what your bandmates did for you and what a Hope Squad member is meant to do. If you want to know how to be a good Hope Squad member, that's it. That's the whole message. You don't need to learn how to be a therapist. You do not need to know how to give good advice. What you need to do is sometimes pick people up and carry them.
Yeah.
That's such a beautiful parallel of what it's all about.
Just hold space for people. Like, it's not, like you said, it's not about this perfect piece of advice. It's just be there. That is so powerful in and of itself. Just be there.
Yes, absolutely. So that's awesome, man. And I'm curious. You mentioned the party life, the band life that you were living before, and that's a cool life. I think most people at one point or another kind of fantasize about that or dream about being a rock star, and you live that life, and now you're kind of on more of what I would say is an esoteric path of mindfulness, meditation, that is kind of to the outside world weird. They might think it's goofy or that it's for hippies or something like that. Tell us about that contrast and how you feel differently now in this life than the one you had before.
What an awesome question. Everything before was superficial. It was just all superficial. That's the best way I can describe it. And not to say there weren't a lot of fun times and cool things we did, but I certainly wasn't in a place where I could appreciate it or deeply experience any connection I had with any audience we played in front of. And also, let me caveat, there was a lot of cool shows. There was also a lot of empty bar. Like there's an equal measure there. It's very humbling for sure. Now there's just so much depth to every experience. It's the connection that I experience my dream has always been for my music to impact people the way that music has impacted me and helped me heal. In my times when I was the most lost, music sort of found a way in, and it carried me, and so that's been my dream. And that happened to a certain extent, but not so much when you're playing a festival or a bar gig where people are drinking, you know what I mean? Like maybe it happened at home when they listen to the song, but it's a different vibe. And so in these settings where we're doing what we're doing now, and we're, usually we pair a lot of the stuff we do in schools and conferences and stuff, we're pairing the music with a bit of storytelling. And it is a space for people to as they see our vulnerability, and it's a space for them. It's an invitation for them to be vulnerable as well. And the experiences that I've had following those shows where I get the chance to talk to folks who are in attendance, and oftentimes tears are pouring down their face, or this song meant so much to me. It's just everything. I don't know. The depth of that is so moving. It's beyond anything that on the surface might be cooler or look cooler. I wouldn't change it for the world. Absolutely.
Yeah. So much closer to your heart, like you said earlier. I had an experience recently. I got to speak at a Hope Squad conference, and speaking, like I said, can cause some social anxiety in me. It gets me excited like nothing else, and also nervous like nothing else, because that's when I feel most alive. I feel like I do have some level of talent in it, and so that gives me higher pressure. I have to do a really good job, because this could be something that really impacts somebody's life, and that's what I want it to be. But if I don't do my best, it could fall down. And so I was giving a presentation about vulnerability, the thing that you were just talking about. And one of my 3 key points was that as a Hope Squad member, sometimes you have to be vulnerable first. you have to have the courage to share how
Yeah.
you are really feeling. And so me up on stage telling everybody that means that I have to practice what I preach. And so I shared just a little bit of how I felt that day, being up on the stage, and not only up on the stage, but in a different state. I drove myself there. It was kind of my maiden voyage as turning into an adult. I just let them know how I felt, and it was nerve-wracking for me. It was vulnerable, but the way that they rewarded it, I never would have imagined. Just applause and people cheering me on, and I wasn't looking for that. I was just being vulnerable so that they would be vulnerable. But really, they carried me. They wrapped me in a cocoon and let me know that's okay that you're feeling that way, and we are here with you. And then throughout the rest of the presentation, they each had an opportunity to be vulnerable as well. And I think that is such a powerful principle of living a mentally healthy life, is binding together, because we all experience difficult things. We all experience beautiful things, and we can find our common ground in both of those. So the question that I'm curious, I'll give you the opportunity to be a little bit vulnerable now. In your life before, you did a lot of hiding, is what it sounds like. Not necessarily just from the world and from the outside, but from yourself and your own feelings. And one of the big principles that you teach now is about self-love. And to really love yourself, you kind of got to spend more time with yourself so you can know who it is that you are.
Yeah.
How do you, I don't know, scale of 1 to 10, how do you love yourself now compared to other times in your life where you were not quite as true to yourself?
I can say that I love myself unconditionally.
Wow.
That's not to say that my experience of life isn't uncomfortable or vulnerable or painful at times, but that is the one thing that I've dedicated myself to. I still have a lot of growth in terms of like self-worth or self-confidence, but most of that stuff for me, I see is coming down to sort of habits of my brain. But I have made a conscious choice, and I put it in practice to begin and end every breath, with acceptance and self-love. And it is not easy, but it is my commitment. And so, and that's not to say like I'm walking around floating on a cloud, just like with like hearts just emanating from me 24 hours a day.
Oh yeah, you are, Jordan. Don't kid yourself, man. I did the meditation with you. It's just peace coming.
But that's, I really do like, that's the commitment. That's the promise that I've made to myself. And that's probably the first promise I've ever kept to myself in my life, is like, I'm just going to love myself regardless. And there's been some really deep down stringent habits and tendencies that I've had to sit with and choose, instead of like vacillating my emotional energy between this, I should do this, I shouldn't do that. It's just, okay, I'll let that war unfold, but I'm going to sit back and just say, I love it all. The good, the bad, the ugly, I love it all. And just really for me, and really, I think how I can say, like, I put that into practice is the same way we were talking about the Hope Squad members or my bandmates, willing to be present with it. I am willing, and I have continued and will continue to cultivate an ability to sit with myself amid depression, anxiety, all that uncomfortable stuff that, so many tendencies to run from or to distract from or to numb or to avoid. That's how I can say, like, I love myself unconditionally, because and will continue to sit through the worst of it. And it's, it's been pretty dark at times, but, I say in one of our school presentations, darkness cannot exist in the presence of light, and you are that light. And so if you're willing to sit with that darkness, then that's love to me,
That's so powerful. I love how you said habits of the mind, and the mind is something that's malleable.
Yes.
For me in my own personal mental health journey, I don't want to share too much, but I just found this interesting that we have this in common. My trajectory changed the day that I was little skinny middle school kid, so insecure that I couldn't look myself in the eye when I went into the mirror. One night I was just fed up. Went into the bathroom, looked myself in the eyes in the mirror, and I still remember this exact moment. I said, Noah, we're going to figure this out. And I didn't know what I was going to figure out. I didn't know anything, but that was the moment I committed to be there for the long haul of my own life, of my own mental health journey. And that's such a beautiful place to start. And you mentioned that it's hard and it is difficult. What are some of the modalities, the different practices that you use to begin each breath with love and to fully accept yourself? Is it mostly through meditation?
Well, I would say it's through the lens of meditation or mindfulness, but I've taken that practice, life is the ultimate meditation.
It just
So
permeates through.
yeah, and consciously bringing it to situations, like for me, very similar to what you just experienced, like speaking engagements, like speaking in front of people, that was worst nightmare material. Like it took me till 27 till I'd sing out loud. And for the first 6-7 years, I was having to drink to get on stage. Then I lost my dad. I took a totally different approach. But that was still like I could hide behind the song and my bandmates. Then when I started to be asked to speak, oh my gosh, like
About your own story.
yeah, I was like, the vulnerability had, by that point, I was about 4 years into meditation at that time. I was comfortable with being vulnerable, relatively, but standing in front of 1,000 people and speaking was like, no, I don't want to do that. The great lesson that my dad's passing sort of thrust on me was surrender. And that was the choice that I made. Like, life is clearly asking this of me. So I will step into that, and I will use this pain, which physically anxiety would manifest for me in those settings as physical pain, as an anchor, just as we use the breath. I will focus on my breath. I will focus on the feel of my heart beating out of my chest. I will focus on my throat getting dry. I will focus on all that uncomfortable stuff in the present moment. I will breathe through it one breath at a time, and it becomes a meditation. And the more that I'm willing to sit with it, the more it starts to unravel and become more palatable. And I sort of create rapid with this sort of love, around it, this presence around it. And so that life is the meditation, but I mean, I've also, there's other kind of more tangible practices, like cold showers is one that I've adopted over the years. But going into my speaking engagements, I was like, every morning to turn the shower to cold and to choose to step in. I feel like I was creating a new neural pathway, like one where I just said, yes, I'm going to step into fear rather than no, even though it just seems trivial on the surface.
No, I do that as well. Yeah.
Okay, awesome, beautiful. Yes, like I say that usually people are either yes or they're like, what is wrong with you? So things like that, where I'm consciously. More recently, I've started to take Krav Maga, which was something like doing martial arts, was something that was something I wanted to do. It was kind of fearful. So it's like I just keep choosing to use any fearful situation, this opportunity to expand my comfort zone as an anchor, just as I would the breath. And that's really it. Life is the meditation.
That's so exciting, dude. That is so exciting. To walk into every scenario fearing what might happen because the challenges that are just a part of your life, that sounds to me like such a trap. That sounds like hell, to be trapped in that all the time. And now you're excited about it. I mean, maybe it's still scary. Maybe it's still hard. You shared as much.
There's a Ronda Rousey, who's like a UFC fighter. She had this quote. I think it was when she was doing professional wrestling for WWE, and she was going to the ring or something, and somebody asked her, do you get nervous? And she said, yes. And she said, but it's just what my body does before I do great things. And I love that. It was so simple. And like that reframed a lot for me. Like, again, I'm not floating around with just hearts emanating. There's human feelings, like I'm a human being, but like it's just a natural response, and the more accepting you are of it, you more realize like, yeah, like this anxious or sympathetic response is just my body sort of getting hyped up to do this or to do that. And there's an appropriate amount of that. And it was only my resistance to that, my fear of it, that then made it this, over the top thing that I couldn't even bear. Anyway, I love that quote. It's just what my body does before I do great things.
Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. And you've done a lot of great things. And you've turned a lot of difficult challenges into very meaningful, powerful things. Your father's passing, something that could have crushed you and shattered you and brought you down a trajectory that we don't want you to go down, instead took you and your family to create a foundation and to do all this good. And it took you and your bandmates to grow an even closer bond, to be just like family, and to share this message with so many other people who it's really, let me tell you, it's benefiting and impacting. And it's been impactful to me today as I sit and talk with you about it. So thank you so much, Jordan,
I appreciate it.
For the trajectory that you're on, the change that you're making, and for choosing to take the brave step to love yourself. I think that might be the hardest part, but I'm so glad that you're choosing to do that. And it's a beautiful thing. What is the trajectory that you hope to be on for the rest of your life and going forward? What do you still hope for?
I this is something I consider at times, purposefully, like, what is the intention, for my life? And really, I think the intention for me is one of union. There's been a sense of division in me for quite some time. And it was, at one time in my life, it was this division between who I was inside and who I showed the world outside. That sort of is largely not the case anymore. There was this division in me where I think before before my dad passed, it was more of a self-serving, kind of an ego-driven pursuit of the music. And I lost my dad, and as I said, it was really this lesson in surrender. And I surrendered and started saying yes to life. And I think there came a point where I was almost overly surrendered. I said yes to everything, and to the point where I started to not really honor myself. And so I'm coming to this place in my life over the last couple of years where I find I studied improv for a while, and there's a philosophy in improv, or it comes down to yes and. You say yes to the situation, and then you build from it. And so I think that there's an authenticity where I can serve myself and serve the community, and surrender and serve, whatever life would have of me. And that's really where I'm at in my life. I want that. I'm realizing that union, that it can be yes and it can be both.
Yeah. Give an example of that.
Well, I can give a great example, because it was really like the moment it crystallized for me was, and it ties into what we were talking about with the anxiety before speaking. My first ever speaking engagement, I was an anxious wreck, and it was at a plenary conference. So they wanted me to be, it was at a suicide prevention conference, and they wanted me to be the plenary speaker. And so I said yes, and never had spoken in front of anybody except for a class full of meditation students. That was it. But this was, a big conference. And so I said yes, and it was a few months out. And as I got closer and closer, my anxiety was building and building and building. And at a certain point, I realized, if I'm going to do this, I have to do it my way, because they wanted a plenary speaker. And I guess in their estimation, it was PowerPoint presentation and kind of just hour of talking. And that is not me. I don't even know how to do a PowerPoint, to be honest with you. I didn't have that in college or high school. So I through that experience, I just made a decision, like, if I'm going to do this, like, I can do it authentically and do it the way I want to do it. And so I reached out to the conference organizers and said, I'm still happy to do it, but here's what I want to do. I want to share personal stories. I want my band to join me and play some songs, and I want to guide some meditation. And they were like, absolutely, that sounds awesome. Yeah. And then I did it. And then it was like, this really amazing experience, which then became sort of my calling card, or our calling card. It's what we do. And that was like the marriage of serving myself and being authentic to what I want and how I want to express myself. And at the same time, serving, what life asks of me, serving others. And that's what I think, that union that I'm continually aiming for. Cause like, I want to be on stage and it's awesome to have people sing along. Like, for me personally, it's great when my music matters to people. And it's also beautiful that maybe it is serving them in some capacity, right? It's like, it can be both. It doesn't have to be like, Mother Teresa is amazing, but that doesn't seem that exciting to me. Sure. I want to still want to play some songs and and teach meditation and do it kind of authentically my way. So just continuing this journey towards a union within and without, and holding, because really through that, I think the point that I would use to wrap it up is I didn't matter before. That was the root of my depression and anxiety. I didn't matter. So before, I needed all these external markers of success to prove to myself and to others that I mattered. Give me another show, another tour, another opportunity. And then it kind of came down to where surrender was beautiful, but also I still matter. I should have a say in what I do. I don't have to wholly give myself over to the world. There's a balance between I matter, and also so does everyone else. There's this beautiful balance that can be had. It doesn't have to be either or, it's yes and so that's my journey, one of union. And we'll see where that carries me.
That's awesome. You're still a rock star. That's what it is. You're still a rock star, and you're teaching meditation and mental health. Nice. Well, thank you so much for being such a good, that's not the word I want to use, such a true advocate for mental health, such a good friend of Hope Squad, because you're willing to share the truth. You're willing to say, I'm going to serve all these people. Yes, and I'm going to be my true self. That's such a beautiful thing, and I've loved speaking with you today, Jordan. And I'm gonna love watching all the things that you do going on in the future. We can't predict them, we can't expect them, but as we continue to be present, we can adjust that trajectory to become who we're meant to be. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be on here. You are an inspiration. I wish I had my trajectory figured out as much as it seems you do at that age.
Oh man.
you're no, but sincerely, like, just thank you for such a thoughtful interview and such wonderful questions and the opportunity to be on here. And this just a podcast about progress. How amazing is that? That's awesome, dude. Thank you for what you're bringing into the world.
Thank you so much. And thank you guys for tuning in and listening. You can learn more about Jordan Lally through looking at his YouTube channel and all of his social media. And make sure you also check out the Ed Lally Foundation and Big Infinite Band as well. Everything they do is incredible.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That I am loved before anything else. It's just sometimes I must remind myself I am loved before anything else. It's just sometimes I must remind myself I am loved before anything else. It's just sometimes I must remind myself.